Doctora Garcia, welcome to the show. How are you?
I am wonderful. Thank you so much. How are you?
I'm excited to be here with you to continue the conversation of child-free wealth. And as soon as somebody mentioned your name and I started to do research on your journey and everything that you do to empower mujeres and people of color, I said she needs to come to the Say Hola.
I'm 100% down for this. So it's exciting to be in this experience with you today.
I love it. And for those of you that are like wondering who is Natalia, Natalia was part of a series on Mommy to Mogul that is phenomenal. And I wanted to bring you to the podcast because you are what I call a rebelde. We talk about a lot of things that most people don't talk about, which we're going to get into that. But before we get there, I want to talk about your upbringings, what's your family background, and also I want to talk about your Afro-Latinidad because I think it's just so beautiful to have someone like you here today. So, how
Yeah.
did you grow up and what was your relationship with money like?
Yeah. So I grew up, I would say, wealthy when I lived in Dominican Republic. My father was a doctor. My mother was a businesswoman. So I was already, and of course, I didn't know that that was unique when I was experiencing it. But I already grew up in abundance. Like my mom and my father, they were socialites. They were well connected in the community because my father, being a doctor in a big city on a small island, was a big deal. And so I grew up knowing that when I lived in the DR, my parents used to throw a lot of parties. We were invited to a lot of, or my mom and my father were invited to a lot of like social functions. And they were part of the social elite. And I didn't know that until years later of excavating my story. And so my life changed when we emigrated to the States. I came to for the first time when I was 5 and the last time when I was 9. And there's an immigration trauma in there that we can get into at some point. But essentially, I was deported, sent back to the DR for a year, and then came back and then didn't leave. And my mom was basically like, after that had happened to me, she's like, no one is leaving until we get our citizenship because we only had a traveling visa at that time and had overstayed it. And that's why I was like, got in trouble. And so that was a really big part of shaping my identity. A lot of times, like even my family will be like, do you feel more American or more Dominican? And I'm like, you would think based off the number of years that I've been in this country that I would be more American identified, and I am. But my roots are still very strong to me because my immigration only happened because I was not a citizen. And so my cousins who were born here, they've never had that. They never have to think about what it's like to get papers or what the citizenship process is like. And I know about that. So I'm kind of like a bridge in my family where I'm also an immigrant, but also like a native to the US at the same time. And when we came here, my parents had divorced. Then I didn't experience that same luxury and abundance. And so it was like no English, no papers, blue collar jobs. And I was told, focus on your education as like the door opener for success, for wealth, for all of the things. And so I did that and got all the way to the PhD, was in corporate for 10 years. And I'm not going to go into detail because I want to leave time for you to ask questions. But essentially, I started to become como desencantada de what I was experiencing. I was like, this is not what I thought the American dream was going to be because I feel miserable. And like, how can the American dream be miserable? Like, why do I feel so disconnected from this dream that I thought was going to be everything for me? And so a lot of my story is about that rebellion of like, no, I don't want this. I don't want this. I don't want this. And not really knowing what I did want. And so through all of those journeys, my relationship with money and abundance has been as up and down as my life story. So I've had to do a lot of unlearning to recognize what money is and deconstruct it. Why do we need it? Why do we have it? Why do we need to get educated on it? And it's informed a lot of my journey about how I've even like set the foundation for my business and building my business the last 2 years. But I'll say to kind of like wrap it up is my personal story and my story with money. I've had to literally research it because I didn't even know what it was. And I think a lot of people don't research what their stories are with different parts of their lives. They may never get to that point. And so I had the time. So I know my money story, but it wasn't always straightforward.
And first of all, I want to start by saying, like, I'm sorry that as a child you have to go through that experience. But realistically speaking, it's the story of a lot of people in our community. We're seeing that right now by the time we're recording this episode. And I just want to acknowledge that we go through so much trauma and it almost feels like it's normal.
Yeah.
And it's not. And we shouldn't have to go through all of these, there's definitely growth when trauma happens and when we heal from trauma, but that doesn't make it okay.
Yeah.
So I just want to acknowledge that. And
Thank
you
you.
said something so powerful about your relationship with money being kind of up and down and all around.
Yeah.
And that is also what happens to a lot of us that are building wealth for the first time, that we see disparities in the way wealth is distributed, disparities in the way people access financial education. And this is why we want to have conversations like this to normalize that A is not okay, and B, that it's also okay for us to own the story. And you said something so powerful that I was just like, this is so good. You talk about researching what was happening to you, and a lot of people don't know that there is a thing such as financial trauma that happens
Yeah.
when parents get divorced, when immigrants go back to their country. Most of us don't even know what it's like, right? And
Yeah.
so I just want to acknowledge all of that. And now I want to talk about when or what happened when you're like, this life isn't for me. The American dream feels like it's not so dreamy. And because you are a mindset expert and you work with women on mindset, what was like for you to go through the process of the American dream is this, but I'm looking for this?
Yeah. It wasn't one thing. It was a series of things that I was experiencing over my career. So I got my PhD, and in the period that I got my doctorate, which is, a lot of times people will see my PhD like, oh my gosh, that's so cool. Like it's almost like I get put on a pedestal. And so sometimes I have struggled with like not even introducing it. Now it's a whole part of my brand. But for a while, there was a lot of shame around claiming my doctorhood because like as women, somos como señorita o señora. And I was like, neither. I'm doctora. Like, where is that? Where do I fill that in? And so in the 5 years of my doctorate, there was a few tragedies that happened that made me despise the fact that I had gotten a doctorate that had nothing to do with the program. My father passed away 1 year into my doctorate. My grandmother passed away 3 years into my doctorate. And my stepfather, who had been in my life since I was 14, he was like my father on the American side of things, if you will. He passed away 2 weeks before I finished my PhD. And so by the time that I finished my doctorate, yeah, it was a celebration, but it was like, what happened? I just lost three elders in a 5 year period that's associated with my doctorate. And as people want to celebrate it and think it's a big deal and I'm a trailblazer, I don't care about that. I'm trying to figure out how do I grieve the fact that in these formative years, I lost three very important people to me. And I don't know how to hold space for that and the achievement of a doctorate. Like those are two really deep experiences that if they happen separately, they're life changing, but they happen at the same time. So that was kind of like the first thing that made me be like, okay, I'm not entering the work world with like all of these like great visions about what my life is going to be. I'm in grief and I didn't know how to handle grief. And so then after that, for the next 10 years, it was a series of I either didn't like my manager, I didn't like the work that I did, I didn't like where I was. I always hated something about my job. And my whole field of study is about studying people at work, industrial organizational psychology. So, like, my job is in studying people at work. And I did a lot of research in organizations and research people that love their jobs, that are high performers, that are leaders, like, was embedded in the people that thrive at work. And I never could figure out how to thrive. So I went from being a student, summa cum laude, top of my class, always killing all of the academic barriers, to being like an above average employee and not caring. And I was like, where is this ambition that I thought I had? And so there was a lot of like self loss in that period where I thought something's wrong with me because why do I hate every job that I have? Why do I not enjoy anything that I've done? And what the hell was the point of this PhD that was going to lead me to this? Like, it doesn't seem like the ROI was like great. And so, like, that was kind of the context that was happening. And then the other part of it in parallel that was happening is like, well, eventually I'm on the path to like get a husband and have kids. My two kids, first a boy, then a girl. I already had the names picked out when I was like 20. I was in an engagement when I was in grad school that I broke after 6 years. I broke in grad school. And after that, I was just kind of like this wild child, like nobody can hold me down. I'm not getting married. I don't even want a relationship. Like, because I had been my identity was so tethered to him. And so then what the other side of this journey has been is like learning how to be an independent woman and like because I wasn't in a relationship and I wasn't on the track to get married and I didn't have kids to take care of, I'm like, well, what do I do with money? What do I do when I hit six figures? Like, what is a 401k? What is IRA? Like, I don't know what these, I know that they're words, but I don't know what they mean and what to do about it. And so the turning point for me came when I was working at Deloitte and I was about 1.5 years in. So because they're an auditing firm, they have really strict rules on where your money and debt can be. So like you have to do a whole audit of your finances when you first start. And if you have money or debt in organizations that they're currently auditing, you have to separate it. So if you have a mortgage with a company that they're auditing, you literally have to change your mortgage provider. And thankfully, I didn't have a mortgage at that time, but I had to take my 401k out of my old company because it was a conflict of interest. So I had like all this money from previous stuff that I didn't even think I was going to have to worry about until I was like 67 or whatever the retirement age is. And I didn't know what to do with it. So they cut me a check and I literally pulled up to the bank and I was like, I got like all this money. I don't know what to do with it. And they're like, well, is it like Roth IRA or traditional IRA? I'm like, I have no idea what you're asking me. I have this money. It needs to go into an account. And so because of the amount of money that I had, I ended up getting a financial consultant to work with me to manage that. And I would just go in there like every 2 weeks and just ask him questions about investing and money. And I'm like, why isn't everybody doing this? This feels like a cheat code. Like, what do you mean my money grows without me doing anything? Like, and with him and other resources, I started studying money. Like, what is it? Why do we feel the way we do about it? How were banks created? Where does money go? Like, I started deconstructing money. And it came from a place of career dissatisfaction. I had been laid off once in my life before. And I said that if I ever got laid off again, I was never going to be caught without like a cushion. And so I started saving money in case I got laid off again. And so it wasn't like I was like, okay, I'm going to build wealth. It was just like, well, I have this money. And I also want to make sure that if I ever get laid off again, I won't be, on my ass. So like, now what? So it was very much like baby steps initially to figure out what do I do with money that I already have.
And I love that you talk about money because money is a made up concept. It doesn't exist. Like, yes, we think that a dollar bill or any type of bill, maybe a Benjamin is money, but it doesn't exist, right? But there
Right.
has to be some type of exchange for us to get paid. And I always think like back in the day when money wasn't around, like people got paid with beans or rice or grains of a piece of meat of some type of animal. Like it's just so to me, like this is incredible because a lot of people get hung up on being so afraid of money when they don't really understand the concept of what money is. Now,
Yes.
I want to talk about your Latinidad because I almost want to say that you are my first Afro Latina on the show.
Love it.
And you're my second doctora, you're my first Afro Latina. How was like for you being in a corporate setting, being Afro Latina?
Oh my gosh. First of all, I didn't know I was Afro-Latina because that as a term just started existing like a few years ago. So there was a point, and this wasn't a conscious decision, but there was a point where I had to choose one identity. I was either going to be Black or I was going to be Latina. And even though my last name is Garcia, because of the stereotypes that people have, I think a lot of people just assume that Garcia is my married name and that I'm Black and I'm married a Latino. And so it wasn't even a question. It wasn't a conversation. And there was a period of time, I was just thinking about this morning because I'm actually heading to Dominican Republic this Friday. And it's taken me a long time. I'm going to be meeting a side of my family that I've never met before, my Garcia side. Because when I emigrated, I grew up with my mom's side, but I wasn't in contact with my father's side. And I have like a dozen or so half siblings and uncles and nieces and nephews that I've literally never met before. And so it's going to be like a reunion back to my roots. And girl, the emotions are
I'm
all.
excited for you. Like I'm already excited for you. I'm crying for you. I'm not gonna cry because I didn't know that, but I'm like excited and happy cry for you.
Yes, I'm very excited. So I basically hid my Latinidad. It was just sort of like a thing that I happened to be. I didn't have Latino friends in Dallas, and I didn't notice. So here's the thing that I think a lot of people like fall into. When you don't pay attention to things in your life, they will also not pay attention to you. So I had never sat down and examined the friendships that I had made and took a look to see who am I surrounded by. And when I did, I was like, damn, I ain't got no Latino friends. Like, what's up with that? And so that was happening at the same time that I was at work. And it took me through. So I had started working after my doctorate in 2012. From 2012, the first time I worked with a Latina was in 2021.
What kind
So,
of music were you listening to? Because Dominicans have like, and I'm saying this because a lot of people know, and my listeners know, I was engaged to a Dominican before my
uh-huh,
husband,
uh-huh.
and I call off the engagement, and we don't talk about that right now because it's not you. But like, Dominican music is so fun and powerful, and romantica, and like everything, right?
Yeah.
So, if you didn't have any Latino friends, were you still listening to?
That's how I stayed connected. Besides my actual family, that's how I stayed connected to the language because I forgot how to read. Like, so Spanish is my first language. I have a fourth grade level education in Spanish, but imagínate, I have a PhD in English. So for my Spanish brain to catch up to my PhD brain, es siempre así que ando. You know, I'm like, how do I say that in Spanish? I have no idea. And so I listened to a lot of reggaeton, bachata. I got into salsa a couple of years ago. Like I listened to the plethora of Spanish music. And at the time, I didn't understand why, but it was to stay connected. It was so that I could still not even just speak the language, but understand the slang. Like Dominican culture is very slang heavy. And parts of what I have had to reclaim as I have gotten back to my roots is realizing how my Latinidad looks different the Latinidad in Texas or the Latinidad in California when I lived there. Because Mexican culture, a lot of people just assume Mexican culture is Latinidad. And it's like, wait a minute, there's like hella countries
Yeah.
that are not Mexico, you know? And so I was finding, like, I was like, como dicen mucho, ni de aquí ni de allá. But it wasn't for me ni de aquí ni de allá in terms of countries. It was cultura too, because Latinos see me and they, when I speak Spanish, they're like, where'd you learn how to speak Spanish from? Why are you Black? And I'm like, I remember there was this Argentinian woman one time who was one of the first Latinas I had met at a work event. And we were talking about no sé qué. There used to be this thing that people used to do. My hair is up today, but it's typically a curly afro. And people would love just touching my hair without permission. And so that was how it started. People just like, can I touch your hair? And I'm like, bro, no. Like, are you going to pay for my conditioners? Because there's a lot that it takes to get into this. And so we were talking about something, and one of the guys in the group, he did touch my hair. And then she was like, basically, like, why are you Black? And I'm like, do you not know that slavery hit almost all Latin countries? And she was like, oh, you're going to take it there? Not in an offended way, but she's like, you're going to take it there? And I'm like, how else do you want me to answer the question of why I'm Black?
Yeah.
I didn't make myself. Like I am a mix of things, but the challenging thing about coexisting with myself is that I'm Black presenting is what I call myself because I only have about 45% African and the rest is European and indigenous. And so even sometimes when I introduce myself, I'll sometimes use Afro Euro Indigenous as a way of introducing myself because I think a lot of times Latinos, we hide our race and we just like
Yes.
pretend Latinidad is like the thing that we all have in common. But I have walked into many Latino spaces and not seen myself represented. I mean, you just admitted I'm the first Afro-Latina, but like, why? Why, where are we? And it's kind of like, I was never Black enough to be Black and I was never Latina enough to be Latina, but I'm both of them. And so I've just had to kind of make my own identity. And it came from work actually helped me to realize that Afro-Latinidad was an intersection that I could claim and I even just started using it maybe like 3 or 4 years ago. And so now I feel like I can claim my Latinidad, but I'm also claiming my ancestry at the same time because I'm not going to erase the fact that I come from a country that is mixed. And I think a lot
Yeah.
of times people will, they just will deny their race. And I'm like, it's an important, you don't have to, it's important for you to know where you come from. That is, yeah, yeah.
100%. And I love everything that you're saying because you said like sometimes people think that Latinos are Mexicanos, and it's like no. Like that's why I say like educate because I remember my my stepdad used to say that to us whenever we didn't know something like like you can't just speak without saying like backing up your facts. And I love that you're talking about these, and I want to shift the conversation a little bit about when did you decided that you didn't want to have kids, right? Because I we were chatting via Instagram and I shared with you, I want you to come to the podcast. And you're like, wait, but why? And I said, because I want to showcase optionality, not just in terms of financial freedom, but also optionality in the things that we acquire, for example, a house, a car, but also optionality in terms of not having to check another box
Yeah.
because society expects you to have kids. Like I have two girls and people are asking me, when are you going to have the boy? And I'm like, never. Like we can't have kids anymore. Like we're not going to have kids anymore.
Yeah.
And with you, when I was having a conversation with you, I thought it was so important that you got to be here with me today, which I'm very grateful for that because you're literally like la más rebelde que he tenido en la podcast in terms of like the things that you're doing. So why is child free the way you want to build your wealth?
Yeah. And that wasn't a conscious choice either. That was like looking back, I can say like, oh, I'm building child free wealth, but I wasn't like, okay, this is what I want to build. It was more so I am a highly sensitive person and my intuition is like crazy sensitive. My energy sensing is really sensitive. But at the time, I didn't know what was happening. I just was overwhelmed. I was over drinking. People would tell me I was too sensitive. I was erupting in my emotions. And it wasn't until I started therapy 6 years ago. So I go to therapy monthly. It's just a part of my wellness. It is not like a I'm
We
in
go to
crisis.
therapy here.
Right. I'm chilling. And my therapist, I'm like, you're going to be my therapist until you quit, this profession. And when I started therapy is when I started to like understand how to be with my emotions and my feelings and all these things. And as the years progressed and I started being able to organize how I felt about every part of my life, then I understood how I felt about every part of my life because it was organized now and I had space to talk about it. And so at the same time that I was going through like disengaged at work, didn't want to get in a relationship again after my engagement, but was still dating a lot. The wildest thing that not many people that I have talked to have had this experience, everybody was always trying to get me pregnant. Men would tell me, jokingly or not, that they were going to get me pregnant and that I was going to give them 2 or 3 kids. And I'm like, why? And so, como yo soy rebelde and I'm so sensitive, like I would instantly have this, es como un fuego que comienza. And I'd instantly have this reaction of like, no, I don't want to do that. So maybe if nobody had tried to get me pregnant, I wouldn't have had that reaction. But it was this constant conversation where men that I dated, whether it was one date or years of relationship, they typically wanted me to be like a mom and a wife. And I was like, what if I don't, what if I don't want to do that? And so I thought that it was something that like was going to kick in. And so in my late 20s, I'm like, okay, maybe when I hit 30, I'm going to like want to get pregnant and like get married. And I hit 30 and I hit 31 and 32 and 33 is when I realized like this is who I am. So my cycle was 17 days late. I was literally on the edge of breaking up with my boyfriend at the time. I already had it planned because I typically plan my breakups. And my period was 17 days late. We had just been on a trip together. I had an IUD, but I was still scared that I might be pregnant. And my niece told me that she was pregnant at one of my birthday parties. And when I had just gotten my period the day before she told me she was pregnant, but there was this instant sense of relief that I wasn't the one sharing that news when she told me. But there was also the sense of relief, obviously, that I'd gotten my period the previous day. And her excitement sharing that she was pregnant, I was like, that's never going to be me. So I thought about motherhood and being a wife like, okay, I guess if I have to, I'll push through it because I didn't know there were alternate routes. But it was never something that I was excited about. It was always something that people told me, not that I would do, but that I had to do. People told me, you have such great genes and so much to offer. Like, why wouldn't you want to have a kid? And I'm like, is that the only way that I can offer what I have? And so it started off as this like resistance and like not dating the right people and like just things not lining up in my relationships. And then when I was 33 is when I was like, I think this is who I am. And then started the journey of, are there other people like me? And started educating myself, me eduqué, on other people that had chosen not to have kids. And I also read books by women who were mothers so I could understand what the experience is actually like and realize that the job of motherhood I never wanted. And the job of motherhood was never going to be small enough compared to the joy of knowing a child that I did not know. So I was like, that labor I'm unwilling to do for a being that doesn't exist because I don't want the job. And so I just knew that if I had kids, I was going to be a deadbeat mom. So I just decided to like save people from that trauma.
Yeah, and for some people it comes so natural and they're so good at it. For me to be like the happy, fun mom that I am in front of my daughters, I have to take care of myself. I have to work out. I have to like plan. I have to even schedule when I'm going to go on dates with my husband.
Yeah.
And then I'm a great mom. But if
Yeah.
I'm unhappy, or if I'm very sensitive too. So if I'm not managing my own emotions, like, and they come to the house and they're like, Mom, the school was awful, there
Yeah.
you will find us
Yeah.
both crying. And so being a full-time mom, it's a lot of work. Like, I'm happy with my girls, but I also want to show other mujeres that, hey, if motherhood is not for you, you don't have to check the other box. You can just say, you know what, thank you, but not for me. And I mean, this whole series that I'm dropping on Childfree Wealth, every one of you that is coming to talk about your story literally is going to inspire somebody else to say, yeah, maybe it's not for me. Just like at some point, we used to believe that having debt and financial struggle was the only way. And now I want to showcase, like, hey, not having kids is also
Yeah.
optionality, and you get to do whatever you want. I'm not here to tell you don't have kids or yes have kids. Like, you get to listen to the stories and then decide, okay, this is for me. So
Yeah.
I love this conversation. Now, what is next for you? Because te vas a ir de vacaciones con la familia. I'm like, te tengo envidia right now, and I would say like, envidia de la buena, okay? Because I love how you just smile so big when you talk about like vas a la República Dominicana, and they're like smiling, la familia. What are you gonna do there? Give me the chisme.
Yeah, I want to say one more thing though before we circle to that topic, because it's going back to what you were talking about, child free. Because I find that when I was going through my journey, it was very lonely, and now looking back, I'm like, oh, that's what I
Sex
was doing.
loves.
So I had the turning point of my niece telling me that she's pregnant, and I'm like, I don't want to do that, and that was in 2019, and then the pandemic happened. And I sat with all of my life and my stories because I quarantined by myself. And in 2021, I actually decided to get my tubes removed. And so that was
So
like,
you did the whole thing.
yeah,
You're like, I'm very sure.
I'm committed to not having kids. I had had an IUD for 5 years at that point, and I was just tired of the symptoms of it. And I didn't want to do hormones, and I didn't want to do something that if I forgot it, I might get pregnant, because that sounded like a total nightmare. And so I remember talking to my gynecologist, who thankfully she believed me when I told her that this is a decision that I wanted and did not try to change my mind. A lot of women do not get that. They get doctors that resist their own knowing. And you said something about like, basically, whether you want to have kids or not, it's about knowing what you want. I find that a lot of mujeres don't know what they want. They know what other people want, but in order for you to know what you want, guess what? You have to spend time with yourself. Because
Hmm.
how else are you going to get to know you without knowing you? It's the same thing. Like if you want to maintain a connection with your husband, you have to spend time with him. Otherwise, you're not going to spend time with him, you know? And so when I told her that I was looking into getting my tubes removed, she was like, well, we can schedule you next week. And I was like, oh, wait a minute. I wasn't that ready. Like I was just asking the question. And it actually took me 10 months to make the decision. I wanted to be like 1,000% sure. And I wanted to add that just because I chose to be child free doesn't mean that I didn't grieve being a mother. I grieved that I would never be pregnant. I grieved that I wouldn't have a baby shower and get to know a little mini me and leave that. Like I grieved that because I had been told that I was going to do that, whether I wanted to or not. And so I wanted to share that too, because I think that a lot of times people think that when they make a decision, they're not supposed to feel grief. You will always feel grief when you make a decision, if you allow yourself to, because you are going from a possibility to another reality. So the night before my surgery, I remember because I had like full anesthesia, and the anesthesiologist had called me and asked me if I had questions. Of course I did. And I remember sitting in my old car in my house. You know how like sometimes you get home and you just sit in the car because you're like not ready to get out of it. And I was sitting in my car and I was like, you're about to have major surgery tomorrow. And I did not want my mom to be here for it. I didn't want anybody to be here for it because I didn't want to carry anybody else's grief. And I remember asking myself, like, are you willing to risk your life in this surgery for this decision? And the answer was yes. So when I woke up from my surgery, I told myself if I woke up from my surgery that I would live my life as I wanted to. And then when I woke up from my surgery, it was almost like now I had this blank canvas that did not include motherhood. I was not going to be forced to give birth like many women are. And now I got to do what I want. And what is that? And that has taken me about 4 years. And so I also want to emphasize that it takes time to know what you want, even if you spend all your time with yourself, like I typically do. But it was like a really important part of not just a decision for me, but I feel like it was a reclamation for the legacy of women that have been forced to give birth in all of our lineages. And it was the first time in my lineage that a woman said, not only do I not want kids, but I won't have them and I won't be forced to do them. So it felt like just a huge turning point in my family where now women, they have to think about whether they actually want kids. They don't have to assume that they have to. So I just wanted
Yes.
to share that
Yes,
story.
and I love that. Like, somebody bring me the palomitas because we are expected to. And earlier you talk about when you were dating, everyone wanted to get you pregnant, and I don't even recall how many times, because it was so many times that when I was also dating, the expectation was we're gonna be having kids like soon. And in my case, I knew that I wanted to be a mom,
Yeah.
but I knew that I wanted to be a mom after I was 35. Like, that
Mm,
was always my goal. And so at 22, when someone is talking to me about getting me pregnant, I'm terrified. And I'm like, I'm breaking up with you. Like, no way, I'm gonna let you do this.
right.
I just love this conversation so much because calling out what we think is normal is also wealth.
Mm,
Saying I don't want to have kids, saying I'm not happy in this corporate job, I'm not happy with following the rules that were created for me without my even
consent.
my acknowledgement of nobody asked me what I want. I think this is why you're here, because I'm like such a chingona. Like, I just love it. But now give me the chisme.
Yes. Oh my gosh. So I am reuniting. So I have like 12, like 10 siblings from my dad that, and like eight of them I don't know. So I'm going to be reuniting with some of my siblings, and most of my siblings are like 35 years older than me because my father was 57 when I was born. So it's almost like meeting ancestors in a way, like they're grandparents, but they're not grandparents in a way, or like different parental figures. And so the bulk of my trip will be reuniting. I'm going to be in Santo Domingo and Santiago, but then I'm also going to Samana, which I've never been to, because I'm taking myself on a luxury tree retreat, like a treehouse retreat. And I'm going to be writing there because I'm working on my book as well. And the idea for the retreat as well is I'm scoping out for a retreat that I'm hosting in October there. And so I want to check it out and see like, what is the vibe? Like, how do they treat people? Like, is this a space where I want to bring people to? Um, and especially because like the island of Hispaniola is so special because it is both the land of colonization and liberation. And so I have decided that I will do at least one retreat there a year and then start to do others around the world. But it is a returning to my roots. It is a reuniting with family, and it is also space for me because what I preach I do as well. So I am taking a sabbatical for myself. I'm leaving my dog in daycare, and I'm going to spend time with myself to write the words of the name. One of the names of my book is La Mujer Liberada, and that's what I'm writing about, is like, how do you liberate yourself from el que ¿cómo que dice? Que dirán, I think is what
Yes,
it's called. How do you liberate yourself from that? And what you said about wealth, about listening to yourself, when I was thinking about, I know you asked that question, what does wealth mean? I have not found a deeper sense of wealth than being attuned to yourself, trusting yourself, and listening to yourself. Because when you're doing that, you're not just listening to you, you're listening to your ancestors, you're listening to creation itself, whatever your spiritual beliefs are. And I think that liberation, which I think wealth and liberation are hand in hand if you want them to be, because not everybody that's wealthy is liberated, and not all
correct.
people that are liberated want wealth. But I think wealth, when we talk about money, it is a resourcing tool. It's a neutral energy. And I think when we befriend money the way that we befriend ourselves, we can learn how to have a healthy relationship with money and not the toxic relationship that many people.
Yes, I have a beautiful relationship with money now, but it has taken me 5 years and I'm still learning, even though I'm teaching people how to also liberate themselves from their limiting beliefs. And I'm also doing that because now I'm entering into a new stage of my journey where things come so easy. And you said this on a reel that you were talking about the capacity to receive.
Yes.
Sometimes that capacity to receive is like wide open, but my nervous system is not ready for it. So I have
Right.
to self coach, or I have to work with my therapist or the people that I'm working with too, because no one in my lineage has ever had such an abundance of resources and such an abundance of opportunities. And now when they're coming, and I'm also working on my book, so I'm like, oh my god, like hold on, let's read, because it just feels so unnatural.
Mhm.
But that's why we're having these conversations. That's why we're talking about money, liberation, and choosing you over anything that people just expect you to do, because that's too boring. So
Yeah.
Doctora, thank you so much for coming to the show. How can people find you and how can they connect with you?
Yes. And I want to say, Lucy, thank you so much for having me. It's been a really fun conversation to talk about money in an exciting way versus just like this logical, well, this is how to budget. Like, yes, all of that
That's
stuff
the
is
other podcast.
important. All of that stuff is important, but I think it's when you look at money from the perspective of your relationship to it, it can also help you see, well, how does your relationship with money, how is that highlighted in how you relate to even other humans? Like, how are you anxiously attached to other humans? And how are you anxiously attached to money and all of that? So thank you so much for this space. So all of my stuff is tagged Dr. Caroline M. Garcia for accessibility. And a lot of the work, which I haven't named it, but this is what my philosophy really covers, is Queen Mindset Leadership. And Queen Mindset Leadership is what arose from my own journey of liberation. It is the antidote to systems of domination. And part of the umbrella of Queen Mindset Leadership is wealth and money. And so, in order for me to teach people how to lead their money like queens, I had to teach myself first. And part of that is having a healthy, open, spacious relationship with money. And a big part of Queen Mindset Leadership is also like the balance between feminine and masculine. So it's not all flow and all in the feminine, but it isn't all structure either. And how can we balance that?
Yeah.
So yeah, and all I'm on Instagram, on LinkedIn. I think those are, yeah, Instagram and LinkedIn, and then my website as well, is all Dr. Caroline M. Garcia.
Thank you. And we are adding her links below. So make sure that you give her a follow. And I have a request. When the book comes out, please come back. I would love to support the work that you are doing. There's not so many of us that are writing a book. And I believe in collaboration over competition. So, Doctora, thanks
Yes.
again for coming.
Thank you so much.